Hi there, today we're going to be talking about altitude and altitude sickness. Altitude is pretty much anywhere in the mountains from 2,500 metres upwards. People will have different effects at altitude depending on their history, their physiology, and also how high they're climbing. And relatively, the higher we get, the more effect we have of altitude. The main issues with altitude that we experience can mostly be identified prior to going into the high mountains, and can making sure that we have a good altitude profile and planning for going to altitude. An altitude profile is pretty much how much ascent and descent we're going to do each day we're in the mountains and each day we go into altitude. And ultimately, the higher we get, particularly in the higher, greater ranges. If we think about the principle that daily we can climb probably between 600 to 1,000 metres of ascent, that's fine going into altitude. But then we need to descend and sleep no higher than 300 metres above where we slept the previous night. So when we're designing an altitude profile, we keep that in mind, that we can go through high passes, but then we drop and sleep no higher than 300 metres each night that we ascend. And a good altitude profile gives us time and allows our bodies to naturally acclimatise to altitude. Most people will experience effects of altitude when they go to altitude. So most of those effects are difficulty breathing, possible a slight headache, waking up in the morning particularly with a headache. But if that headache goes with taking a paracetamol, hydration, generally that means we can manage our ascent into altitude and let our body naturally acclimatise. There are a number of medications that can be taken as well prophylactically, so acetaminophen, known as Diamox, which can help people's profile or help people's body work with a good altitude profile as well. So some people may be taking some medication that will enable them to acclimatise better. That doesn't work for everybody. So a good altitude profile is key, preparing ourselves, ensuring that we walk slowly, ensuring that we're hydrating, ensuring that we recognise the symptoms in ourselves and others. Generally, at altitude, those type of symptoms come under a category of symptoms known as AMS, acute mountain sickness. And said most people going to altitude will experience some form of AMS during their time in the mountains. Headaches, nausea, dehydration will be common symptoms that we will experience when going to altitude. So again, recognising those in yourself and making sure that you are aware of that and the other members of your team is also important. But taking paracetamol, letting the headache go, rehydrating will manage the symptoms of acute mountain sickness. In the worst case scenario, if that sickness gets worse, we need to descend. The only real treatment for acute mountain sickness is descent, and people find that they recover quite rapidly when they descend. Worst case scenario are the high altitude edemas. So this is the build-up of fluid in the body. It either happens in the lungs, and that is known as high altitude pulmonary edema, or HAPE, or it happens in the brain, which is high altitude cerebral edema. Both these conditions are serious conditions in the mountains. They require large evacuations, so it's really good to make sure that we're monitoring groups and each other individually while we're in the hill. High altitude pulmonary edema, the symptoms of that generally is breathlessness, struggling to breathe, coughing, and ultimately leads to unconsciousness and potentially is fatal. And cerebral edema is very similar, but it happens in the brain, and this means that people suffer from very intense headaches. The paracetamol is not working, and ultimately can lead to unconsciousness and therefore for the casualty to stop breathing as well. So we need to descend people very quickly in those situations and get them to medical help. Most cases of acute mountain sickness, if we descend, we generally don't need to go to further medical assistance, but with HAPE and PACE, we definitely need to do it. Particularly in the very high mountains, so above 4,000 metres, we need to be definitely considering those conditions if we have people in our teams and our groups that are that are suffering from that, the breathlessness, the very severe headaches, and they may need assistance to descend as well. Most people can generally descend on their own steam, but we may need to be able to assist in a variety of ways to get those casualties down. But as I said at the beginning, the key to good acclimatisation and operating at altitude is preparation, allowing the body to naturally acclimatise by spending time in the mountains, climbing high but sleeping low, making sure that we are hydrated, that we have first line medication in terms of paracetamol, and that we're looking after each other while we're in the mountains.